All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to be looking at the political landscape post-2024 election. We've got a really fascinating segment here from Fox News' Jesse Waters Primetime that we're going to be breaking down. And yeah, some interesting insights here. So let's just jump right in.
Yeah, one of the things that really struck me was this idea that, Biden is in office, but the segment really kind of played up this idea that Trump still holds a lot of sway.
Yeah, they really juxtaposed those images of Trump out there, very public-facing, winning, Patriot of the Year on Long Island, and then the upcoming coin toss at the Army-Navy game with Biden kind of quietly returning from this trip to Africa.
Right, exactly.
It's almost like presenting two different versions of, leadership in a way.
Yeah, and they even went so far as to say the consensus is that Trump is basically running things, which, might be a little hyperbolic, but it definitely kind of points to this narrative that they're pushing, that even without holding office, Trump's influence is undeniable.
So if Trump is this dominant force, then what does that mean for the other side of the aisle? And the segment kind of shifted then to the Democrats and, let's just say they weren't painted in the most flattering light.
Yeah, it was interesting how they focused on these almost symbolic moments that seemed to point to dysfunction, like Chuck Schumer kind of struggling to give a thumbs up during a photo op, for example.
Oh, yeah. And then that expensive cardboard backdrop that Kamala Harris used for a podcast interview, which apparently cost like $100,000.
Yeah.
It's just these little details that kind of stick in your mind and contribute to this perception of, well, maybe not chaos, but certainly, a lack of unity or direction.
Right. It kind of feeds into this narrative of the Democrats being in disarray. They also bring up, financial woes that are plaguing Harris's campaign and critiques of Biden's leadership. And then they even mention these calls to have Al Sharpton suspended from MSNBC, highlighting these internal conflicts within the party.
Yeah, it's all quite a contrast to the image of Trump that they presented earlier, isn't it?
Right.
It's almost like they're setting up this dynamic where one side is strong and assertive and the other is kind of, struggling to find its footing.
Yeah, it's definitely a deliberate framing, and it makes you wonder if this is a reflection of, a deeper shift in the political landscape or simply a strategic narrative that's being pushed by certain media outlets.
Well, and speaking of shifting landscapes, this is where I think things get really interesting. They started talking about these potential new political alliances that are driven by shared interests rather than those traditional party lines. And they bring up Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, who has declared himself part of the American Party and expresses this willingness to work across the aisle.
Yeah, Adams is really fascinating because it suggests this move away from this rigid two-party system, which, a lot of people see as increasingly divisive and unproductive.
And then they also mentioned John Fetterman's admiration for Elon Musk, despite their political differences. Fetterman even praises Musk's contributions to AI, SpaceX, and the economy.
Yeah. It's almost like they're highlighting these examples to suggest that, maybe, just maybe, we're entering an era where pragmatism and these shared goals might be gaining some traction.
So on the one hand, you have this narrative of a resurgent Trump and this struggling Democratic Party. But then on the other hand, you have these hints of potential realignments and this focus on finding common ground. It paints quite a complex and dynamic picture, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And it really makes you wonder what's next. Where are these trends heading? And what does it all mean for the future of American politics?
Well, the segment goes on to discuss Trump's potential next administration, which Jesse Waters describes as a team of creators and destroyers.
Oh, wow.
Sounds pretty intense, wouldn't you say?
Intense is one word for it, yeah. I think we should dive into what exactly they mean by that and what implications it might have for the country.
Yeah, let's unpack that a bit.
Yeah, it definitely grabs your attention, creators and destroyers. It stood out to me, too. They presented it as this, bold and unconventional approach. A mix of innovators who are going to drive progress and then reformers who will kind of dismantle what they see as this broken system.
So who are these creators and destroyers? Did they drop any names besides J.D. Vance? They praised his hands-on approach to problem solving?
Well, they didn't really get into specifics beyond Vance. They kind of painted this broader picture, focusing on, harnessing innovation in areas like AI, crypto, energy, areas that are already seeing significant development, regardless of, who's in charge. It felt a bit like they were taking these pre-existing trends and then weaving them into a narrative about Trump's potential leadership.
Ah, so claiming credit for the momentum that's already building. Classic political strategy. But what about the destroyers part? What exactly would they be dismantling and how?
Well, they talked about, cleaning house across the administrative state and, extinguishing the rot. But they kept it very vague. which frankly raises some red flags. Without specifics, it's hard to assess whether these are like legitimate concerns or just fear-mongering tactics.
Right. It's easy to throw out terms like rot without defining what that means or providing evidence to support those claims. It just kind of plays into this sense of unease and dissatisfaction without offering concrete solutions.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, what are the potential consequences of such a sweeping overhaul, Destroying without a clear plan for what comes next could lead to more chaos and instability, not exactly the golden age they're promising.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that we need to look beyond the catchy slogans and really delve into the substance of what's being proposed. Any significant change comes with risks, and it's crucial to understand what those risks might be.
Absolutely. And that's where critical thinking comes in. We can't just accept these grand pronouncements at face value. We need to ask the tough questions, demand evidence, and consider alternative perspectives.
Okay, so we've got this intriguing mix of creators and destroyers potentially shaping the political landscape. But let's not forget about those hints of realignment we discussed earlier. Eric Adams and John Fetterman both expressing openness to working across the aisle. That felt like a significant departure from the usual partisan battles.
It did. Their willingness to challenge the status quo and prioritize common goals could be a sign that the grip of traditional party lines is loosening.
Do you think we're witnessing a genuine shift towards a more pragmatic, collaborative approach to politics, or is it just wishful thinking?
It's hard to say for sure. It's certainly a trend worth watching. There's a growing sense of frustration with the gridlock and polarization that have dominated American politics for years. People are tired of the constant bickering and the lack of progress on critical issues.
It's like that quote they played from Jon Stewart, where he talked about the media creating this constant sense of anxiety and fear. Maybe there's this growing fatigue with that kind of negativity, a desire for a more grounded and constructive approach.
Perhaps. And if that's the case, figures like Adams and Fetterman, who are willing to break the mold and reach across the aisle, could play a significant role in shaping this new landscape.
Okay, so we've covered the potential for dramatic change under a team of creators and destroyers, and the possibility of a shift towards greater collaboration and pragmatism. But there's one crucial piece of the puzzle we haven't addressed yet.
I think I know where you're going with this. We've been talking a lot about politicians and pundits, but what about the American people?
Exactly. Where do they fit into all of this? What are their hopes, fears, and expectations as we navigate this complex and uncertain political terrain?
That's what we'll explore next as we delve into the mood of the nation and what it might mean for the future of American democracy.
Yeah, it feels like we've been kind of, looking at this political landscape from like 1,000 feet up, talking about these power dynamics and potential shifts. But what about the people on the ground? Like, what's the view like from their perspective?
Right. That's a great question, and one that often gets lost in all the, whirlwind of political analysis. We can talk all day about, strategies and potential outcomes. But ultimately, it's the American people who are going to be, experiencing the impact of these changes.
So what's the mood like out there? Are people feeling optimistic, disillusioned, anxious? I mean, I imagine it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, absolutely. It's complex. After years of, intense political division and just turmoil, there's this sense of weariness out there. People are looking for stability. They're looking for leaders who can offer, a clear vision for the future and address their concerns in a meaningful way.
And I imagine those concerns vary pretty widely depending on, people's backgrounds and their experiences. There's no one-size-fits-all answer to what people want or need from their government.
Exactly right. And that's why it's so crucial for, politicians to engage with this broad spectrum of voices, to truly listen to the needs and aspirations of these diverse communities. Crafting policies that reflect the shared values and interests of the American people, that's the challenge.
It's a tall order, especially in such a polarized environment. But it's also a reminder that politics, at its core should be about serving the people, not just pursuing power for its own sake.
Couldn't agree more. And I think that's something that resonates with people across the political spectrum, There's this yearning for authenticity, for leaders who are genuine and relatable, who understand the challenges that everyday Americans are facing and are committed to actually finding solutions.
Which kind of brings us back to, Eric Adams and John Fetterman. They're not your typical politicians. And their willingness to kind of challenge the status quo and work across party lines seems to be striking a chord. Maybe that's what people are looking for, a fresh perspective, a break from this partisan gridlock.
It's certainly an interesting development, whether it signals, a genuine shift towards a more pragmatic and collaborative approach to politics remains to be seen. But it at least suggests that people are hungry for something different, something that moves beyond these, tired old divisions that have plagued our country for so long.
So where do we land after this deep dive? What's the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
I think the key message here is this. We're at a crossroads. The old ways of doing politics seem to be crumbling, and there's this opportunity to forge a new path. One that's more inclusive, more responsive to the needs of the people, and more focused on solving problems than, scoring political points.
A path that will require courage, vision, and a willingness to kind of break free from the constraints of ideology and truly embrace the complexities of our time. And it's a path that will demand, active participation from all of us as citizens.
Well said. We can't afford to be passive observers. We need to engage in thoughtful dialogue, challenge assumptions, hold our leaders accountable, and demand better from our political system.
And that engagement starts right here with conversations like the one we're having today. So keep questioning, keep exploring, keep those critical thinking skills sharp. And speaking of keeping things going, we want to take a moment to talk about our own journey here at Standing in the Gaps.
Yeah, we're incredibly passionate about these deep dives and bringing you these, thought-provoking conversations on a wide range of topics. But we're always striving to improve, both in terms of our content and our production.
Exactly. We've been dreaming of upgrading our equipment, things like webcams, studio microphones, and editing computers, to really enhance the listening experience and reach a wider audience. However, as you can imagine, high-quality equipment doesn't come cheap.
That's why we've launched a GoFundMe campaign. Your support would mean the world to us. Even a small contribution can help us achieve our goals and continue to bring you these deep dives.
We'll be sure to include a link to the GoFundMe page in the show notes. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of the political landscape. We hope it sparked some, thought-provoking reflections and maybe even inspired you to get more involved in shaping the future of our democracy.
Until next time, keep those minds open, those hearts engaged, and those conversations flowing.
And as always, thanks for standing in the gaps with us. See you next time.